Reddit, what are the best psychological mind tricks you know? Story 1, my boss at a retail store taught me a trick for dealing with customers who won't stop talking. Start walking toward the door while responding. They naturally follow, then open the door and keep talking until they're outside. Then say, "Okay, have a great day," and walk back in. Story 2, whenever I don't feel like exercising, I tell myself, I'll just do something light. It gets me started, and I often end up doing a full workout. Story 3, I use this technique at work. Present two options to management. One that you want and another obviously worse. They often choose the better one without a second thought. Story 4, if you give something to someone while talking, they'll automatically grab it. One time, my boss handed me a bag of paper, and without thinking, I tossed it, only to realize it was a list of names for Secret Santa. Story 5, to create space on a crowded sidewalk, just stop. People will instinctively move around you, clearing a path. Story 6, if someone's making you uncomfortable, look at their forehead instead of their eyes. It subtly undermines their confidence, making them second guess themselves. Story 7, want someone to fill in the silence. Just stay quiet after they answer your question. The discomfort often compels them to share more information. Story 8, when someone makes a rude comment, play dumb and pretend you didn't understand. It forces them to either repeat it, making it awkward, or drop it entirely. Story 9, if you're stuck between two options, flip a coin but don't look at the result. Pick the choice you hope won. Story 10, to make someone more agreeable, ask for a small favor first. Once they say yes to that, they're more likely to agree to bigger things. Story 11, if someone interrupts you while you're talking, keep speaking but lower your volume. They'll naturally start listening closely to hear what you're saying. Story 12, when working in customer service, I discovered it's helpful to say, "I'm getting frustrated because I really want to help you, but I feel like you don't believe me." It makes people feel like you're invested in helping them. Story 13, if someone's angry or upset, mirror their emotion briefly, then gradually bring your tone down. It shows you understand while subtly calming them down. Story 14, to help kids agree to something, tell them, "I'll time you." Making it a challenge turns a chore into a game. Story 15, if you're stuck in a conversation on the phone, ring your own doorbell or knock on the door. Say, "Hey, someone's at the door, I've got to go," and hang up. Story 16, when learning a skill, I tell myself I'll practice for just 5 minutes. Often, I end up continuing much longer. But even if I don't, it's 5 minutes of progress. Story 17, the fastest way to get an answer to a question online. Post an incorrect answer. People are quick to correct mistakes. Story 18, if you want someone to like you, ask them for a small favor, like passing the salt. Psychologically, helping you makes them feel a little invested in you, making them more likely to feel positive about you. Story 19, to improve relationships, give unexpected small gifts at random times. People appreciate surprises more than predictable ones. Story 20, if you're at a social gathering and want to leave soon, start yawning. Yawns are contagious and others will get tired, making it easier to exit without it feeling abrupt. Story 21, when I deal with difficult customers, I act as if they're mentally challenged. Staying calm, keeping my voice even, and not reacting to their tone throws them off and de-escalates most situations. Story 22, if you're trying to calm down or distract your mind, try reciting the alphabet backwards. It requires focus, helping shift away from the stressful situation. Story 23, if you ask someone a question, then stay silent, they often fill in the quiet space by revealing more than they planned. Story 24, when dealing with indecisive people, I say, "Don't worry about it." The dismissal often makes them more willing to cooperate. Story 25, a useful technique when someone shares an inappropriate joke. Ask them to explain why it's funny. They'll often backtrack, realizing how awkward it sounds out loud. Story 26, if you misplace something, put it back in the first place you look for it when you find it. Your brain remembers it better that way. Story 27, for a gentle way to de-escalate situations, use a sandwich method for bad news. Start with something positive. Mention the issue, then end on a lighter note. Story 28, to build rapport. I occasionally tell someone what I think they're good at and casually mention that others think so too. It subtly boosts their confidence and how they view others. Story 29, if someone's being rude, don't react. Just look at them blankly. Silence removes the power they get from upsetting you. Story 30. When someone's speaking, small gestures like nodding, keeping eye contact, and using affirmative sounds make them feel understood and heard, leading them to trust you more. Story 31. If you're trying to stop a bad habit, tell yourself you'll give in later. The delay often lessens the urge, and you might skip it altogether. Story 32. In customer service. If someone calls angry, I overplay empathy. Oh no, your cable was out for 2 hours. How frustrating. They often feel heard and respond more calmly. Story 33. When memorizing something important, write it down repeatedly. The repetition cements it in your mind and speeds up recall. Story 34. When you want someone to trust you, let them see you make a small mistake. It makes you appear more human and relatable. Story 35. When in a tense conversation, I mimic the other person's body, language, and tone. It builds rapport and makes them more open to listening. Story 36. If you want someone to feel good about an idea, ask their opinion on something similar. It makes them feel valued, even if you have to lead them toward your preferred outcome. Story 37. When someone's ranting, don't argue. Let them talk without responding. They'll often talk themselves out of their anger. Story 38. To make a decision, write down the pros and cons by hand. The physical act of writing helps clarify thoughts and brings insights that are hard to get on a screen. Story 39. If you're stressed and can't focus, find a wall to press your forehead against. The slight pressure calms nerves and clears your mind. Story 40. When giving feedback, I lead with something they're good at, then address the issue and close with encouragement. It makes them more receptive to change. Story 41. When asking for a big favor, I start by asking for something small, then escalate. People feel invested in helping you and often agree to more than they would initially. Story 42. If you need someone's help, engage them with, I could really use your expertise with this. People love feeling valued and are more likely to help when they feel important. Story 43. Intense negotiations. If things don't go my way, I just stay quiet. The other person often gets uncomfortable and adjusts their offer to fill the silence. Story 44. When I'm teaching someone something complex, I start by saying, I'll explain this simply, which psychologically prepares them to understand, even if it's difficult. Story 45. A great way to get out of a sticky conversation is to look at your watch or phone and say, oh, I didn't realize the time. It signals that you need to leave without being rude. Story 46. If you're in a crowded place and people keep bumping into you, walk slightly slower. The change in speed often makes others adjust to your pace and avoid you. Story 47. When making friends, I compliment someone genuinely but add that others think the same. They'll feel appreciated and may trust you more. Story 48. To focus before a big task, I visualize myself succeeding. Imagining positive outcomes reduces stress and boosts confidence. Story 49. A calming trick for dealing with anger: smile, even if forced. The muscles used in smiling release feel good chemicals, which naturally reduce anger. Story 50. When handling an upset person, listen to their full story without interruption, then validate their feelings. It makes them feel valued, and they're more open to solutions. Story 51. When I work with people who constantly talk over me, I start speaking softly. They'll naturally lower their voice to hear what I'm saying, often giving me back control of the conversation. Story 52. If you're having trouble getting started on something, tell yourself you'll work on it for just 5 minutes. Most of the time, you'll keep going even after the time is up. Story 53. If you want someone to stop making hurtful jokes, ask them to explain why it's funny. They'll feel embarrassed and often drop the joke from their routine. Story 54. When dealing with a difficult person, I mirror their actions and tone subtly. This builds a connection and makes them more likely to ease up and listen. Story 55. When I'm in a negotiation, I let the other party talk without interrupting. They often reveal details that give me an advantage or talk themselves into a corner. Story 56. If someone's arguing with you, instead of reacting, say, that's interesting. Tell me more. They often lose momentum when they have to keep explaining their point. Story 57. To get someone to agree with you, nod slightly as you speak. People subconsciously mirror others and may start nodding along, making them more receptive. Story 58. And when I need someone to calm down, I acknowledge their feelings with phrases like, can see you're really upset. They feel heard, which often helps them cool off. Story 59. If someone is rude or aggressive, I keep my response calm and composed. It throws them off because they expect a reaction, and they often back down. Story 60. To make someone comfortable, I repeat the last few words they said in my response. It shows I'm actively listening and makes them feel understood. Story 61. I find that if I'm in a conversation and want it to end, I slowly start closing off my body language by crossing my arms or stepping back. The other person often picks up on it and wraps things up. Story 62. When working with kids, if I ask them to do something and they hesitate, I say, "I'll time you." Making it into a fun challenge almost always gets them to do it right away. Story 63. If I need help from someone, I add, "It's really important to me," to my request. It creates an emotional connection, and they're more likely to say yes. Story 64. If someone's unsure about a choice, I tell them to flip a coin. They don't even have to look at the result. They'll instinctively lean toward the option they hope will win. Story 65. In a job interview or meeting, I mirror the person's body language subtly. It builds rapport and makes them more likely to feel positively toward me. Story 66. When people ask me for advice, I give two options, one clearly more favorable than the other. This way, they feel like they have control, but they usually choose the better option. Story 67. If someone's giving you a hard time, calmly ask them to explain their reasoning in detail. It often exposes flaws in their argument and makes them reconsider their stance. Story 68. In customer service, if someone's angry, I say something like, "Wow, that sounds frustrating." They often feel validated and calm down. Story 69. If someone's telling a joke that's offensive, I'll pretend not to get it and ask them to explain. They usually stop, realizing it's not as funny as they thought. Story 70. When faced with a tough decision, I take a quick walk or change my environment. The new perspective often brings clarity. Story 71. When I'm nervous or anxious, I take deep breaths and count backward from 10. It shifts my focus and helps me relax. Story 72. If someone's upset and venting, I nod and make sounds of agreement. It shows I'm listening, and they usually feel better afterward. Story 73. When someone criticizes me, I ask, "Can you explain that?" Asking for details makes them rethink or clarify, often softening their stance. Story 74. If I'm in a crowded space and need to make my way through, I avoid eye contact and gently walk forward. People often make space without me having to say anything. Story 75. In meetings, I echo key points someone made earlier, especially if they were overlooked. It shows I'm attentive and gives them a chance to reassert their point. Story 76. When giving someone bad news, I start with a compliment or something positive, then gently introduce the issue. It softens the blow and makes them more receptive. Story 77. When I'm frustrated, I force myself to smile. It's hard to stay mad when you're physically smiling. It tricks the brain into calming down. Story 78. To quickly remember something, I repeat it to myself out loud 3 times. It helps solidify it in my memory. Story 79. When someone's speaking, I lean forward slightly and nod occasionally. It shows I'm engaged, making them feel more connected and willing to open up. Story 80. If someone cuts me off in traffic or is rude, I imagine they're having a bad day. This perspective helps me stay calm and not take it personally. Story 81. When I can't decide between 2 options, I flip a coin and see how I feel about the result. The feeling of disappointment or relief tells me what I truly want. Story 82. If I feel like someone's lying, I stay silent and maintain eye contact. The tension often prompts them to fess up, or at least. Story 83. Sorry, if I'm talking to someone and they glance at their watch or phone, I wrap up quickly. They're signaling they need to go, and I respect that cue. Story 84. When someone seems stressed, I say, "It seems like you're going through a lot." They feel seen and often open up about what's bothering them. Story 85. If someone is trying to manipulate me, I pretend to misunderstand their motives. It forces them to be more direct, often revealing their true intentions. Story 86. When I need to memorize something, I visualize it in a familiar place. Associating it with something familiar makes it easier to recall later. Story 87. To calm myself before a big event, I imagine the worst-case scenario and how I'd handle it. Knowing I have a plan eases my nerves. Story 88. When someone's upset, I lower my tone and speak slowly. It has a calming effect, and they often mirror my pace. Story 89, if I need kids to calm down, I speak in a whisper. They stop what they're doing to listen, creating a more peaceful environment. Story 90, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I break tasks into smaller steps. Focusing on one thing at a time makes it manageable. Story 91, if I'm in a heated discussion, I say, I want to understand your perspective. It disarms the other person, making them more open to a productive conversation. Story 92, when I see someone doing something impressive, I acknowledge it in a specific way, like, I noticed how detail-oriented you were with that. They feel genuinely appreciated. Story 93, when I need people to focus, I preface my words with, "This is important." It signals that what follows needs their attention. Story 94, if someone's sharing something personal, I mirror their words or use a similar tone. It builds a connection and helps them feel understood. Story 9, people to listen. I start with an engaging story or example. Once they're hooked, I introduce the main point. Story 96, when someone's angry at me, I say, I can see how you feel that way. It acknowledges their emotions without agreeing, often diffusing tension. Story 97, if someone's upset with me, I don't react defensively. I listen calmly, which often makes them feel heard and reduces conflict. Story memorize names. I repeat them immediately after being introduced. Saying it out loud helps cement it in my memory. Story 99, when I want someone to agree, I subtly nod as I speak. They subconsciously mirror my actions and are more inclined to agree. Story 100, if I need someone to agree with my idea, I start with, I need your perspective on this. It makes them feel valued, increasing the likelihood of their support. Story 101, when someone tells me something, I say, oh, that's interesting. Can you explain more? It makes them feel valued and keeps the conversation going. Story 102, if I'm struggling to focus on a task, I set a timer for 10 minutes. Telling myself it's only a short time makes it easier to get started, and I often keep going after it's up. Story 103, if someone's mad and says something rude, I pretend not to understand. Asking them to clarify makes them realize how hurtful their words are and often diffuses the anger. Story 104, when people ask for my opinion, I start by mirroring part of their question. It shows I'm listening and makes my answer feel more thoughtful. Story 105, when someone's rude in public, I respond with exaggerated politeness. It catches them off guard and usually gets them to back down. Story 106, I found that if I want someone to open up, I stay quiet and nod slightly. They fill the silence and often share more than they initially intended. Story 107, when someone's explaining something to me, I say, can you show me? It engages them further and makes the conversation more interactive. Story 108, if I disagree with someone's opinion, I respond with, that's an interesting perspective. It keeps the discussion respectful and avoids escalating into an argument. Story 109, to remember information, I repeat it out loud 3 times. Saying it aloud reinforces the memory, making it easier to recall later. Story 110, if I feel nervous, I clench my fists and release them. The tension releasing gesture tricks my brain into feeling more relaxed. Story 101, when I want someone to finish their point, I look at my watch or the clock. They'll often pick up on it and wrap up without me saying anything. Story 120, if I need help, I say, I really value your opinion on this. It makes the person feel important and they're more likely to lend a hand. Story 103, when I'm stressed, I take a few minutes to practice deep breathing. It instantly calms my nerves and helps me regain focus. Story 104, when people are mad at me, I respond by mirroring their posture. It creates a subtle connection and can help them calm down. Story 115, to remember someone's name, I use it in conversation shortly after meeting them. It reinforces my memory of their name and shows I'm paying attention. Story 116, if someone's defensive, I say, I want to make sure I'm understanding you. It shows I'm open to their perspective and often de-escalates the situation. Story 107, when someone's talking too much, I slowly move toward the door or an exit. They'll follow, and it's easier to wrap up the conversation outside. Story 118, if I need to get something off my chest, I start by saying, I don't want to make a big deal, but it softens the impact and makes the other person more receptive. Story 119, when in an argument, I repeat the last thing the person said. It makes them feel heard, and they're more likely to listen to my perspective. Story 120, to improve focus, I do short sprints of work followed by a few minutes of rest. The breaks help prevent burnout and keep me energized. Story 121, if I can't decide, I make a pro-con list by hand. Writing it out provides clarity and often highlights which option I prefer. Story 122, when I want people to listen, I pause slightly before making an important point. The pause grabs attention and adds weight to my words. Story 123, when explaining something, I use analogies relevant to the person's interests. It makes complex topics easier to understand. Story 124. To deal with anxiety, I tap my fingers in a rhythmic pattern. The repetitive motion calms my nerves and helps ground me. Story 125. If I'm nervous before a presentation, I visualize the audience as friends. Imagining familiar faces reduces stress and boosts my confidence. Story 126. When someone's upset, I stay calm and validate their feelings. People appreciate being heard, and it usually diffuses the tension. Story 127, if I need someone to agree, I phrase my idea as if it's already being considered. Since we're planning it implies they're already on board. Story 128, to remember details, I relate them to things I already know. Creating connections helps with recall and understanding. Story 129, when someone's sad, I ask questions to show I care, like what's been on your mind, and encourages them to open up without feeling pressured. Story 130, if I want someone's opinion, I say, I'd love your insight on this. It makes them feel valued, and they're more likely to share openly. Story 131, when people are mad at me, I say, I understand why you feel that way. It acknowledges their emotions without agreeing, helping to calm them down. Story 132, to boost creativity, I take a quick walk or switch locations. Changing my environment often brings fresh ideas and perspective. Story 133, if someone's uncertain, I reassure them by saying, you're making the right choice. The validation boosts their confidence. Story 134, when I need a quick energy boost, I do a few jumping jacks or stretches. The movement wakes me up and increases focus. Story 135, if someone's being difficult, I avoid direct confrontation and instead say, let's find a solution together. It shifts the dynamic to a cooperative one. Story 136, if someone's emotional, I lower my tone and speak slower. It signals calmness, and they often mirror my energy. Story 137, when people are defensive, I say, I'm just here to understand. It puts them at ease and helps them open up. Story 138, if I need someone's help, I say, I'd be really grateful if you could. People are more inclined to help when they feel appreciated in advance. Story 139, if I want to remember a conversation, I summarize it right after in my own words. This makes the key points stick in my memory. Story 140, if I'm anxious, I mentally count things around me, like items on a desk. Focusing on specifics helps calm my mind. Story 141, if someone's rude to me, I maintain eye contact and stay silent. The lack of reaction often makes them uncomfortable and rethink their behavior. Story 142, when someone's explaining a point, I nod occasionally. It encourages them to continue, and they feel I'm genuinely interested. Story 143, if I need to make a decision, I ask myself, what advice would I give a friend? Thinking of it from an outsider's perspective brings clarity. Story 144, if I want someone to take my advice, I ask, would it help if I shared a suggestion? Giving them control makes them more receptive. Story 145, if I'm in a heated discussion, I lean back slightly and stay calm. It signals that I'm not easily provoked, often calming the other person. Story 146, when someone tells a story, I react with interest and ask questions. Showing engagement makes them feel valued and builds rapport. Story 147, if I'm trying to persuade someone, I start by agreeing with one of their points. Finding common ground makes them more open to my perspective. Story 148, when someone's upset, I say, I can tell this means a lot to you. It validates their feelings, and they're more likely to calm down. Story 149, if I'm nervous about a task, I focus on breaking it down into the first small step. Starting small makes it less intimidating. Story 150, when someone gives me feedback, I thank them, even if it's hard to hear. Appreciation disarms them and makes future conversations easier. Story 151, if I want someone to open up, I share a small personal detail first. It makes them feel more comfortable and encourages them to reciprocate. Story 152, when dealing with an angry person, I say, I can see why you'd feel that way. Validating their feelings often calms them down and makes them more receptive. Story 153, if I want to remember something, I associate it with a song or rhythm. The connection makes it easier to recall later. Story 154. If someone's arguing, I stay silent and look at them calmly. The silence often prompts them to reconsider their stance or explain themselves further. Story 155. To make someone feel comfortable, I mimic their speech patterns subtly. People feel more at ease around those who communicate like them. Story 156. If someone's defensive, I say, I'm here to understand. It reassures them and often makes them more willing to share. Story 157. When I'm in a meeting, I nod along as others speak. The simple gesture shows engagement, encouraging others to open up more. Story 158. If I want someone to see my point of view, I preface it with, I see where you're coming from. It makes them feel validated, making them more open to my ideas. Story 159. When I need people to stay focused, I say, this is important. The statement commands attention and keeps them engaged. Story 160. If I need someone to trust me, I share a minor personal vulnerability. It makes me appear more relatable and trustworthy. Story 161. When I'm nervous, I take a deep breath and let it out slowly. The breath slows my heart rate, helping me feel calmer. Story 162. If I'm in a debate, I ask the other person to elaborate on their point. It often highlights the flaws in their argument or helps find common ground. Story 163. When I want someone to calm down, I speak in a soft, steady tone. People often mirror the calmness, reducing their anger. Story 164. To encourage kids to clean up, I make it a game. Let's see who can pick up the most toys. It turns a chore into a fun challenge. Story 165. If I can't decide between two options, I pretend a friend is in my situation and think about the advice I'd give them. It often brings clarity. Story 166. When I want someone's opinion, I ask, what's your take on this? It's an open question that makes them feel valued. Story 167. If I'm uncomfortable in a conversation, I politely excuse myself with, I just remembered something I need to do. It's an easy exit without offense. Story 168. When someone's upset with me, I say, I understand how you could feel that way. It acknowledges their perspective, often diffusing their anger. Story 69. If I want someone to agree with an idea, I say, it's just a thought. But presenting it as casual makes them less likely to resist. Story 170. To remember names, I associate the person with something familiar. For instance, I might connect Anna with a character named Anna, reinforcing the memory. Story 101. Someone's being difficult. I stay calm and mirror their tone. It makes them feel understood, often diffusing the situation. Story 172. When someone's upset, I say, tell me more. It invites them to share and feel heard, making them more receptive. Story 173. If I'm about to give criticism, I start with a compliment, add the critique, then close with encouragement. It makes them more open to feedback. Story 174. When I'm uncertain, I ask myself, what would make me proud of this decision? This perspective often clarifies the right choice. Story 175. To quickly remember something, I visualize it in a mental image. Associating it with a vivid picture makes it easier to recall. Story 176. If I need someone to listen, I start with a personal story. The people are drawn to stories and are more likely to engage with my point afterward. Story 177. When someone's defensive, I say, I'm not here to argue, just to understand. It relaxes them and opens the door to a productive conversation. Story 178. To remember facts, I relate them to something in my environment. Associating ideas with physical objects improves recall. Story 179. When people are upset, I nod along and listen quietly. They feel understood and are often less angry afterward. Story 180. If someone's telling a joke that's offensive, I say, can you explain that? The request to explain often makes them realize how uncomfortable it is. Story 181. To make someone feel valued, I acknowledge their effort with specific praise. Saying, I noticed how hard you worked on that, means more than a generic compliment. Story 182. If I need to concentrate, I turn on instrumental music. It helps me focus without distracting lyrics. Story 183. When people ask for advice, I mirror their question back with, what do you think you should do? It helps them think through the problem themselves. Story 184. If I'm nervous about something, I visualize a positive outcome. It calms me down and makes success feel more achievable. Story 185. When I want someone's honest opinion, I say, be brutally honest. The invitation for candor makes them feel safe to share openly. Story 186. To make someone like me, I mirror their body language subtly. It builds rapport and makes them feel a connection. Story 187, when people are defensive, I reassure them by saying, I'm not judging, just trying to understand. It makes them feel safe to open up. Story 188, if I need someone to calm down, I say, I'm here to help you. Let's figure this out. It shifts their focus from anger to problem solving. Story 189, when I'm in a tense situation, I focus on taking slow breaths. It keeps me calm and helps manage my emotions. Story 190, if I want someone to feel comfortable around me, I mirror their tone and pace. People often feel at ease when others communicate similarly. Story 191, to make a memorable first impression, I ask questions about the person's interests. People enjoy talking about themselves and associate me with positive feelings. Story 192, when someone's explaining a tough situation, I say, that must be hard. They feel validated, which builds trust and connection. Story 193, if I'm uncomfortable in a conversation, I subtly shift my body language to show it. People pick up on the cues and often adjust their behavior. Story 194, to encourage a team, I highlight their strengths. We've got a great group here, boosts morale and makes people feel valued. Story 195, if someone's being defensive, I say, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. It shows empathy and often softens their tone. Story 196, when I need someone to agree with me, I start with, I respect your opinion, but. The respect statement eases them into my perspective. Story 197, if I need to recall something later, I write it down immediately. The physical act of writing solidifies it in my memory. Story 198, when people are angry, I respond with a calm voice and relaxed posture. It makes them less likely to escalate. Story 99, to stay motivated, I set small goals and reward myself for each one. The rewards keep me engaged and make tasks feel achievable. Story 200, when someone's stressed, I say, you've got this. The reassurance boosts their confidence and helps them push through.